So what happens if I don't homestead my property? And the short answer to that question is you will pay more in property taxes. So homesteading is something in Florida. It's pretty common around the country, but in Florida, homestead does a couple of different things. It gives you a $50,000 exemption on the assessed value of your property. So, for example, if you have a property that is assessed for tax purposes at $350,000, if you homestead that property, it is going to be assessed at $300,000. So let's just say, for example, you pay 2% of your assessed value in property taxes. That's the difference of $300,000 versus 350, 7,000 versus 6,000. So if you were at a exactly 2% tax rate, it would save you $1,000 a year in property taxes. The other thing that homesteading in Florida does is there's something called Save Our Homes Act, which caps the increase in assessed value for a homesteaded property at 3% a year. So basically, if your property, you buy a property that is assessed at $350,000, for example, you homestead it, it gets assessed, you get the exemption, it's assessed at $300,000. If, let's just say, 4 years later, kind of this happened during COVID, pretty frequently, that same property might be worth $900,000 or $800,000 or $700,000, right? For a non-homesteaded property, the county can just come in at any point and reassess your property and say, hey, you pay 2%, you pay 2% property taxes. Your house is worth 350. Well, guess what? We just reassessed it and the house is now worth 700. So instead of paying $7,000 a year, you're paying $14,000 a year, and your property taxes could literally double based on the county coming in and saying, hey, your property is worth more. On a homestead property, that increase is capped at 3% per year. So 3% of $7,000 would be $210. So the most that your property taxes could go up on a homesteaded property that was taxed at $7,000 would be $210. So you go 7210. So that is very tremendously helpful for people to keep homes affordable. That's why the Save Our Homes Act is called the Save Our Homes Act. Is we don't want the property taxes coming in on homes that people have lived in for many years. They probably bought for very cheap. Back in the day, if you bought a house for $80,000 in 1994, you may not have the money. Your house is probably paid off. You might have the money to pay property taxes on an $800,000 house or whatever it's worth now. So that allows people to not get crushed to death with these crazy high property tax bills based on gentrification or based on whatever the case might be. The property values sort of rising up in the neighborhood. It keeps people who've owned in that neighborhood for a long time, it keeps them from having an unaffordable tax bill. Investment properties are not you're not qualified for homes. The only property that you can homestead is a house that you actually physically live in. So this will not help investors who are renting their properties out. They're going to be subject to property tax increases, kind of across the board. Whatever the county assesses it at, you're going to pay the tax rate times that. But if you live in the house, you homestead it, you're going to have those two protections where you're paying slightly less in taxes from that exemption, and you're also going to be capped on what it can increase every year, so it remains affordable.